The Law School Admission Council has just adjusted the new GPA policy they announced earlier this week. If you submitted your transcripts before July 28th, you can now ask LSAC to recalculate your GPA under the new rules. You can reach out by phone, by chat, or by email, and that's on their site right now. But most applicants don't even know this option exists yet. But for a lot of you, making that request is the wrong move. And I'm going to give you the math breakdown that tells you which position you're in. Takes about 2 minutes. You just got to have your transcript in front of you. And there's a second page on LSAC's site that raises a real question about whether a recalculation even reaches the law schools that already have your file. I'm going to get to that. Quick catch up if you missed the news earlier this week. On Tuesday, LSAC stopped counting college courses you took while you were in high school towards your LSAC GPA. The rule is effective that day and only for transcripts submitted from that day forward. But the way they framed the policy created a mess. You could have two applicants with the same grades and different GPAs depending on when their registrar hit send. Now, here's exactly what LSAC said. I'm going to read it word for word because the wording decides who's covered. Quote, to ensure an appropriate transition to this new approach, any prospective applicant for admission in 2027 or later who, prior to this change, submitted transcripts that included college courses taken during high school may request that their LSAC GPA be calculated in accordance with the new policy. Then you've got the three ways to ask. Phone by calling 1-800-336-3982, the chat function on their site, or emailing lsacinfo@lsac.org with GPA recalculation in the subject line. And this announcement, aside from the emails to pre-law advisors and licensees, was buried in a collapsed section on their transcript summarization page under a heading about dual enrollment and AP credits. Buried so deep you have to already be looking for it just to find it. And the email went to pre-law advisors on Tuesday talking about dual enrollment. It mentioned AP classes once and only as a comparison, saying dual enrollment would be reported the way AP credits already get reported. But the live page says something different. It says dual enrollment courses and AP or CLEP courses taken during high school will not be counted in the CAS GPA. And the old section, the one that used to explain that AP and CLEP courses are included when they show up with a grade on your transcript, is gone. That part is deleted. And so if you had an AP course that landed on your undergraduate transcript with an actual letter grade attached, and some do, that grade used to count, now it doesn't. And LSAC's own parenthetical downplays it. In their words, the vast majority of AP courses have never been counted, so this only affects a very small proportion of AP credits. That's fair, and it's probably true, but the rule changed, and if you're in that small proportion, it changed for you specifically. So who actually qualifies for the recalculation? It's prospective applicants for admission in 2027 or later who submitted transcripts before the change that included college courses taken during high school. Now here's the math. The request only goes in one direction. You can ask LSAC to calculate your GPA under the new policy. That is the only thing you can request, and there's nothing published that lets you undo it after. So it's like a one-way door with no posted sign on it, and the whole question is which side you want to be on. What you got to do, compare the grades you earned in high school to the grades you earned in college. If your high school college course grades were worse than your college grades, taking them out raises your number. If they were better, taking them out lowers your number. That's the entire decision. If taking them out raises your GPA, you should call and request the change. If it lowers your GPA, don't ask for a change. Now, let's put real numbers on both sides because that'll make it more clear. Let's say you earned 24 credits of dual enrollment at a 3.4 GPA because you were 16 and taking college classes at 16. That's 100 credit. Then you did 100 credits in college, earning a 3.85 at a real 4-year program. If you blend the grades the old way, LSAC reports you at a 3.76. If you strip out the high school credits, you're at a 3.85. That's 0.09 of a point for your GPA. Just for making one phone call, you should make the call. Get the high school credits taken out. But if you flip it, that's no longer the case. Let's say you were a kid who did exactly what your guidance counselor said. You did 30 credits of dual enrollment, straight A's at a 4.0 GPA, then 90 credits at a harder undergrad program for a 3.75. With the old calculation, you're at a 3.81. With the new calculation, you're at a 3.75. So you'd be calling LSAC to lower your own GPA by 600ths. Why on earth would you do that? Don't call them. And 3.81, by the way, I didn't choose that number randomly. That is NYU's 25th percentile undergraduate GPA for the class that started last fall. It's also the exact reported median at 7 different law schools. So making that call moves you from the bottom edge of NYU's published range to underneath it, and from the middle of the class at 7 different law schools to below the middle. You also want to check your dual enrollment transcript for A pluses, by the way. LSAC converts an A plus to a 4.33, not a 4.0. That's from their conversion table on their site right now. And they do that even if your college caps their own scale at a 4.0. So if your old transcript is full of A pluses, the grades you'd be deleting are worth more than perfect, and the hit's bigger than you might think. And you also want to size all this against your credit load, because most people are nowhere near 30 credits. 24 credits would be a full year of college taken in high school. If you run that same grade gap at 6 credits, which is just 2 classes junior year, the move is about 200ths. That's a rounding error. It's insignificant. If you took 2 classes at the community college and got Bs, this is not an emergency for you. You should be studying for the LSAT rather than worrying about this. Now, everything I just described is for people who already submitted transcripts prior to the change. Now, if you haven't sent in anything yet, you're getting the new calculation automatically. You can't make any requests for a change. No point in calling them. You don't get a choice in this. So if you were a kid who crushed dual enrollment and your transcripts went in last month, you can call LSAC, you can make a decision. You get to look at both numbers and keep the better one. But if your transcripts have not yet gone in, you don't get a choice. You've got the new number. You can't ask for the old calculation because the recalculation request only runs toward the new policy. You could be the same applicant with the same grades, have gotten a 4.0 at 16. One applicant has an option, the other one doesn't. All depends whether you already sent in your transcript. That is the split cycle. And I don't think that's what LSAC intended. I think they just wrote a transition rule for the people who got caught by the switch and didn't think about people who had not yet encountered this situation. But if you're a high performer who hasn't filed yet, there's no number to call. No point in even worrying about any of this. Just focus on your LSAT. Now, there are a couple of things LSAC has not yet addressed anywhere I can find. If you are requesting a change to your GPA, which you can do if you fit the category I mentioned earlier, there is no mention of how long this will take for them to make the change. And so given that we still have a month before applications open, I would request the change now so they have time to process it. They're probably getting inundated with calls these days from what I could tell. A lot of confusion they've created this week. They're also not saying whether there's a deadline to ask for the change. No cutoff or expiration on this transition window. And there's also not a whole lot of clarity about what happens if law schools already have your transcript. And LSAC has a separate page about law school reports, and they list the events that trigger sending an updated report to schools you've already applied to. If you retake the LSAT, if LSAC receives an updated transcript, if there's an error in a transcript or there's a new letter of rec that comes in. A policy recalculation is not on the list, though, probably because this is a new situation. And they also say that LSAC will not send law school reports at your request. And of course, most people eligible for this are applying for 2027, so the reports aren't even out yet, and this never comes up. Maybe that's why they didn't write this down, but again, if you do want to request the change, I'd request it sooner rather than later. And LSAC could have approached this differently. I think they were a bit too quick to jump the gun on this. There were a handful of ways they could have fixed this. They could have just recalculated everybody automatically. They could have started fresh in a new cycle for everybody. They could have run both numbers for everybody and chosen the better one. All this news, all this inside baseball only reaches people who follow LSAC announcements, nerds like me, somebody with a pre-law advisor who actually reads their emails, someone who paid a consultant, someone who watches live streams about LSAT and law school admissions like you fine folks. The reason for the change that LSAC is mentioning is that access to college courses varies by high school and that students may not know or may be incorrectly advised about how the grades would count. And I think that's true, but the solution for an information problem is to spread the information widely and to avoid penalizing those who are out of the loop, not to quietly make a change on a random July Tuesday and make it apply to folks regardless with a random cutoff without prior warning. The people most likely to be hurt by not knowing are the same people who are not going to find a collapsed section on a random page of the LSAC website. And so, again, if you're in this situation, if you have the option to change how your GPA is calculated, call LSAC sooner rather than later. Give them time to make the change and update your transcript well before applications open. And if you're not in the group affected by this, or you don't have an option to change anything at all, then don't worry about it. Focus on what you can control, which is your LSAT score. I mean, your LSAT score weighs more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA combined, certainly a lot more than just a couple of classes that you took in high school, for example. If you want my help getting a higher LSAT score, getting into better law schools, getting more scholarship money, I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG.